above therapeutic dosages, there's less receptors available for that medicine. Of course, that makes totally sense. The thing here that What is up guys, and welcome. My name is Philippe and I run the channel Alpha Mode, where I talk about fitness, health, steroids, whatever, lifestyle in general. If you're new to my channel, consider to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on any content that I provide for you guys. So in today's video we are going to talk about gear and how much you actually can run before it becomes a problem to your health, considering how much muscle you can gain and why that actually is, and also what happens when you run several different kinds of gear and if they interfere in each other on how effective they'll be. So first off, I thought it was important to talk about the golden era. We all know that time period where people used to have more hair and they didn't die in their 30s. There were so many problems with the GH gut and you know the whole drill about all this stuff. And mainly I think this is because back in those days, people didn't know a lot about pharmacology and they didn't know how the meds were actually used in real science and practice. So what they usually did was do 1 cc of some kind of compound at those days. Usually testosterone came in something like 50 mg or 100 mg, and usually what they did was 1 cc Monday, Wednesday and maybe Friday, and the same goes for Primo, it was 50 mg. So if you gather that information up, you know for sure that they did something like 100 to 200, maybe 300 mg of gear weekly, and that was their cycle for that time. If we're gonna fast forward a little bit, we can go forward until the 19s and early 2000s, where we had those massive giant muscle monsters, you know, Dorian Yates and at least Phil Heath. We all know those giant mass monsters, and we all know for sure that at that time period people were doing pretty heavy cycles at that time and just going for the whole massive monster look. And this is where the GH gut came into play and people were eating way too many carbs and such and yada on. Now if we end up in, let's say, the late 2010s, we have guys like Boston Lloyd died from doing too much gear, and he did use that, well, I think it was called like Team 3cc, where he actually just made fun of his own health by doing 3cc's of everything more or less. He ended up dying. That's really sad. Seriously, I did like the guy. We had someone like Rich Piana who had this weird confused the body kind of thing, where he did like 1 cc of trend and next day 1 cc of test, and he didn't even measure ups in milligrams. He was just a cc, and that can vary a lot. So if we end those areas today, it is very well known and it is a fact on different forums that a little less will get you very far, or whatever you can call it. Less is more, and people usually tend to go with maybe 500 mg of gear for a cycle. And even though a lot of guys are on 200 milligrams of testosterone replacement therapy and they are gaining a massive amount of muscle. So I thought it was very important to talk about how that actually came to be, why something like 1000 milligrams of testosterone doesn't work as well as 500. And when I'm saying that, I mean like 500 milligrams of testosterone, let's say it will produce 500 grams of muscle in a week. Well, why doesn't 1000 produce a kilo, and so on? And what actually happens in what's called the pharmacology when you shoot more gear. So while we're talking about how much gear you can absorb, I want to show you a picture I have, and this is from a book, so sorry for the bad quality. So I actually just had to take a picture from my own personal book here. This is Wang and Dale's Pharmacology. This is what med students use and doctors use when they are reading up to become, whatever you can call it, have a PhD or a candidate in whatever they're doing. I'm reading the same stuff, but I use real books, so I had to provide you this picture. So the thing is, I'm going to show you the picture here, and I have the picture on my phone. I'll just talk and you can follow and see whatever I see on my phone. So what we actually see here is that on the graph, we can see that as you increase the amount of a drug, the amount of free concentration of the same drug increases. As the total amount of the drug increases, the amount of the drug bound will not decrease, but it will have a sloping effect on the curve, meaning that when you take more of a drug, less of it will be able to bind to the receptors. Another thing you can see on the left side of the graph is that the more of a drug you take, the more free parts or free molecules of the drug that you will have. So what this in general means, if we apply this to testosterone, is that if you take more testosterone, you will have more testosterone free in the body, unbound to receptors, not able to bind. And you can assume that there will be a direct correlation with the more drugs you shoot, the more of the drug will not bind. And the more of the drug that is not bound, that means that it is a candidate for being converted into estrogen or 5-alpha reductase into DHT. And we all know that we don't want more estrogen or DHT. So the more drugs you take, the more of it will actually not bind to the receptors. That is the first part that I wanted to show from the book. The next part is when you combine drugs, what actually happens, because all these drugs want to use the same androgen receptors. They have different affinities, they have different strengths, some are reversible, some are irreversible. I won't go into that in detail in this, but I want to read this part up from my book, and I'm gonna share a picture of it over here so you can just follow me. Please bear in mind that I'm trying not to butcher this while I read up for you, but I can remember this stuff only by memory, so I'm gonna read it up and you can follow over here, and I hope you can get the point of what I'm trying to tell you. If two drugs A and B compete in this way, administration of drug B can reduce the proton binding and hence increase the free plasma concentration of drug A. To do this, drug B needs to occupy an applicable fraction of the binding sites. Few therapeutic drugs has this binding affection and other drugs, yada yada yada. They occupy a therapeutic plasma concentration, only a tiny fraction of the available sites. So basically what this means is when you're using therapeutic dosages, this is not a problem. Now I'm not gonna continue and read the whole stuff because you can just read it out here to my left side. But what I want you guys to understand is we are talking about therapeutic dosages. Therapeutic dosage for testosterone is around 100 milligrams a week. Later down in this picture, you can actually see that if you increase something above therapeutic dosages, there's less receptors available for that medicine. Of course, that makes totally sense. The thing here that they actually explain with this paragraph is, let's say that you are taking 20 milligrams of Anavar daily, and then you increase your testosterone dosages to, let's say, 1,000 milligrams a week. The problem here that they describe in the book is that even though testosterone has a weaker binding affinity for the receptor, because there's so much testosterone, it can actually just by sheer number flush out the Anavar from the receptors. Just like when you have a mob, you know, they push, and other people can get through the mob or whatever you can use as a reference for this. Just understand that if you have too much testosterone, they will actually occupy all the receptors and push the Anavar or whatever drug you are using away from the receptors. Meaning that a high number of a weaker drug isn't always a very good idea when you have a more expensive drug and more potent drug and better drug available in your system, because there's only so many receptors available for that site. So basically, I hope I get my point across when I'm trying to explain to you these 2 points of interest from the book. The first one being that if you increase any kind of drug in your system, less of that drug will be able to activate the receptors, meaning more of it will go to waste, and in the end you will have more, let's say, testosterone going on in your body, available to 5-alpha reductase becoming DHT or becoming estradiol or something like that, which is harmful to your body and you don't want that. And the second one being, if you take 2 drugs or more than 2 drugs, just know that if you take a weaker and less potent drug, it can actually outcompete the stronger and better drug for the receptors by sheer numbers. And this can actually be a problem because usually I've seen guys do something like Anavar or something like that, Primo or whatever, and they'll just add a shitload of testosterone into the cycle because it's cheap and why not use it. But actually what can happen is that the Primo, the Anavar, the Trenbolone, whatever you're using, will maybe not be available at the receptors because there's so much testosterone just competing for those receptors. I think this is correct when I say this is a medical procedure they actually use, they call flushing. if you have something occupying receptors or proteins, anything like that, let's say a drug, and they have to get it out of your body, or not out of the body, but stop it from working, they can actually just take another drug and just flush your whole system with that drug, making the other drug unavailable to act in your body. And I think it's called flushing. I'm not quite sure. I'm not a doctor, as I told you guys many times before, but the same concept applies to when you are taking gear or anything else like that. So lastly, please note that I didn't talk about affinity, and I didn't talk about which drug were the stronger drug in the affinity aspects of this whole video, because that is what's called pharmacodynamics also, and it's a very complicated topic. I want to keep this simple for now, and maybe we could go into a deeper detailed version of this. This was part 1 of my 2-part video. The next part I will share some studies on how actually testosterone will increase muscle mass in men via a study where they didn't work out. That will be, I think it was 25 mg, 50 mg, 125 mg, 300 mg and 600 mg. Nobody were training, and we can actually see how much muscle mass they gained over 20 weeks for each cycle, let's call it that, without training, and you can use that also for reference point. We will also discuss what some of the weight gains were from that study and see where maybe the best dosages for testosterone is if you are considering to use the lowest dose for the highest amount of muscle mass without wasting a ton of gear for no reason, and maybe going bald like some of us have done in prior past time. So guys, if you want to follow this kind of videos, please subscribe, like, comment, you know the whole drill. And until next time, I'll see you. Cheers.